Can we address reverse racism? Can we talk about how white people experience racism on a daily basis? I'm so happy that on this app we're seeing more white people come out and talk about it and address it publicly without being afraid. We have people that look a lot like me come on here saying horrible, horrible things about white people, and they think that it's appropriate when I disagree. It is not appropriate to attack anybody based off of their race. If you don't like to be attacked based off of your race, you should not be doing it to anybody else. And trust me, I will be the first one to say something if I see somebody that looks a lot like me discriminating against anybody that doesn't look like me. And what baffles me the most is the audacity. They always have a justification. They always have an explanation as to why they said what they said. But enough is enough. Nobody should be living in fear. Nobody should be beating around the bush. Nobody should be walking on eggshells. If you are going to be hateful, you need to be corrected immediately.
Greetings everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel once again. And if it's the first time that you're coming across my content, I will kindly request that you hit the like, subscribe, and the share button. And to my returning subscribers, I'd also like to thank you and encourage you to interact with this video through liking, commenting, and sharing.
There's no such thing as reverse racism. You can only be a racist if you have the power to institutionalize what you're doing to people who are different from you. What we're calling reverse racism is natural reaction to being treated unfairly on the basis of somebody else's ignorance. Now, don't ever let anybody say to you or about anyone around you that people don't like that person because of the color of their skin. That isn't the reason white people don't like people of color. They don't like people of color because they don't understand about skin color. And they don't understand that we all are descendants of somebody who looked like your mother.
That's deep.
You don't really want to get me started on this because
I do want to get you started.
I'm really angry about how we are miseducating the American mind.
And what I like the most about what you're doing in your exercises is that you come in with a very direct attitude. You even call yourself the B word.
Well, but you see, the B word for me is the one that's most often used to refer to me. It used to bother me a lot. For me, the B word is an acronym for being in total control, honey. So you want to call me that? It'll prove to me that you're out of control. And then I'll whip out my little Lorena Bobbitt fruit knife and take care of it for you. Go on.
So is it necessary to strip away all of a white person's power, like in your exercises, in order for them to see the light? Or is there another way
It's necessary to do what we do in offices and in the military and in schools and colleges and in hospitals and in community groups all the time. What we do is we become our parent ego. We go into our parent ego state, and that forces all those we're working with into their child ego state. And if you watch our so-called president, he spends most of his time either in his child or his parent ego state. He never gets into his adult ego state unless he's reading off the teleprompter. And he is such a poor reader that oftentimes he makes mistakes, and then he is instantly in his child ego state right in front of your very eyes. It's absolutely fascinating to watch it happen.
Speaking of our president, a lot of people say that racism has risen under him.
Anybody who doesn't say that hasn't been paying attention. It absolutely has. I'm getting more hate mail now than I have gotten for years. The kinds of things that are being said in this country today are things that he has said for the last 2 years. He has said them publicly, and he got elected because he said them publicly. We have a group of people in the United States of America who were in response to 8 years of a black man in the White House and the possibility that they might have from 4 to 8 years of a woman in the White House, will elect anything that walks and can chew gum at the same time. This last election is...
It is really frustrating to me that so many people don't understand why reverse racism isn't a thing. Let me start by saying I am not invalidating any white person's experience of prejudice. What I am saying is that a lot of people think that prejudice and racism are the same thing. Prejudice is an aspect of racism. However, the difference is racism is prejudice plus power. And by power, I mean on an individual and institutional level. We do not live in a society where every racial group has equal power. In our Western world, white people do not experience job discrimination, poverty, police brutality, and incarceration. at the level that black people do. And I'm not saying here that they don't experience these things at all, but they do not experience it on the same level as black people. And racism can't and won't end without the awareness that all races are not treated equally in our society.
Hi, I'm Kylie, and no, I don't think white people can experience racism. Can white people experience hatred because of the color of their skin? Yes. But is it as severe or damaging as when people of color experience racism? No, not at all. And because there are institutional barriers to the success of people of color in systemic inequalities, racism is a stronger and more apt term for what people of color experience on a day-to-day basis. Prejudice is simply harboring negative attitudes towards somebody based on a characteristic that they can't control, which I feel is a better description of the attitudes that some people of color have towards white people. Am I going to be profiled and arrested based on the color of my skin? No. Am I going to have a harder time getting a job because of the color of my skin? No. Am I more likely to be arrested, incarcerated, or wrongly convicted because of the color of my skin? Or called slurs? Like, no, I'm not. So that is why we say white people can experience prejudice, but not racism necessarily. Because it diminishes the harm of actual racism by saying that white people can experience it. You don't say that men experience sexism, because they don't. Yeah, some women have hostile attitudes towards men, but it doesn't affect their day-to-day life or their opportunities or make them psychologically distressed.
If you've ever spoken about white supremacy, you've probably been accused of being a reverse racist. But the reverse of racism is equality, so what do people think reverse racism is, and why doesn't it exist? As we've been learning, race is a system that was invented to do racism. And racialization, or the categorization of people by race, was literally invented to uplift white people. And that's not something I'm saying, that's something that they said. And white supremacy is the false and harmful idea that white Western Europeans are inherently superior in every way and should therefore rule society, and society should revolve around them. Because racism is systemic, we are taught racism, and that informs our beliefs, and our beliefs inform our behaviors. And so if we don't do the work of unlearning those racist beliefs, we might do racist actions, whether that happens consciously or subconsciously. Anyone, regardless of whether they're racially privileged or racially marginalized, can be racist. But by the rules of racism that the racists created, white people cannot be harmed by racism. They can only be uplifted. So in the context of white supremacy, if you're white, racism can't harm you, it benefits you. And that's not my opinion, that's literally how and why race and racism were invented. Being privileged means that you benefit from a system of oppression at the expense of others. And if the system of oppression that you're benefiting from is race, then you can't be harmed by racism. But you can be harmed by other systems of oppression, or privileged in other ways. That understanding comes from intersectionality theory, as coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. But by the rules of the construct of race, and the racism that it enables, racism only goes in one direction. And we all have some idea that this is true, otherwise they wouldn't be calling their made-up phenomenon reverse racism.
Recently I was having a debate on whether or not you can be racist to white people. I feel that this should not still be a conversation, so let's talk about it. I feel like the dispute when it comes to this topic comes down to two different things. Number one, a misunderstanding of sociological topics in general, and number two, a misunderstanding of how words work, specifically how definitions work. Let's just go back and think about how sociology started, specifically how we started talking about race within sociology. I won't say he's the first, but let's look at W.E.B. Du Bois and think about his time period. Obviously, this was a time period that was very, very different from current day. At the time, there wasn't really much wiggle room when it came to race relations. You had white people being racist and other races just taking it. Why? Because you would literally be killed if you so much as looked at a white person the wrong way, right? We did not see any different dynamic. But there was something important here when it came to race relations. There was a reason why we coined the term racism. We're interested in the power dynamic between white people and other race. So we were interested in that almost supernatural affinity towards whiteness and dehumanization of blackness, and so on and so forth, everything in between. And that is why we coined the term racism as meaning discrimination based on race. Although we meant something a little bit more specific, we were really talking about the phenomenon of power imbalance. We just coined it as, discrimination based on race because we never saw any other type of discrimination based on race. You weren't seeing black people going out there and calling white people crackers because they would die. Now let's just jump forward into 2024, and now we're in a time where, everyone systematically has the same rights. And even though it's still a little gray area, there's still more room for me as a black person to, outwardly say whatever I want and go as far as to be mean to white people. Today, I can kind of confidently go out there to a white fellow classmate and say, hey, you're a cracker, and not really expect anything to happen to me. Now, obviously, minorities still have to be a little careful in what they say regarding white people. It's still a very gray area, but there is definitely more room to do so. Now, because of the more equal, and this, I'm saying this very, I'll say because of the more allowed freedoms we have as minorities to say what we want, to do what we want, technically by the definition we've held for how many hundreds of years now, minorities can be racist to white people. But if you remember what I said like a minute ago, the reason that we actually coined the term racism was to pinpoint a specific phenomenon in society. A phenomenon of power imbalance. That was the tangible reality that we saw. That was what was important. For example, there's a reason why we don't have, a word for eye color discrimination, because it's not a salient enough issue in society. We define and give names to sociological phenomenons because of how impactful they are. White-based racism, though on the outside seems like it's somewhat similar to discrimination based on race to other minorities, is absolutely in objective value completely different. It doesn't have nearly the same tangible effects on society and the structure of our society as does white people saying slurs to other races. This is why we cannot call them the same thing. They simply are not the same thing. By adding in white-based racism to the definition of actual racism, you're diluting the meaning of what it is, the tangible impact of what it is, etc. Language and sociology are not these logically consistent constructs. These are constructs that are based upon the living, breathing world. People and their ideas are literally constantly changing, so we cannot apply these just strict logical frameworks to these ideas. I know this was a yap sesh, but I hope this cleared it up. Yeah.
Maybe because I'm mentally unstable, this is actually one of my favorite topics to debate. A few months ago, I made a video on reverse racism and how it's not actually real, especially in our society built on white supremacy. But people like that guy love the idea of experiencing racism. Phyllis, she just got something out of the trash. So let me help break it down. In the US, we are a society built on white supremacy. A lot of people look at the definition of racism and they say it's simply prejudice against somebody based on their race. But actually, there's a little more to it. You need to actually have a belief that you are superior or they are inferior based on their race or your race. So if a white person says, I just don't like black people, they think black people are inferior to them. And our society confirms that for them. If a black person says, I don't like white people, there's no system in place in our society where they can use that in any powerful way. So again, to this guy, reverse racism is not a thing. And you as a white man will not experience racism in America because we are a society built on white supremacy, where no matter what class you are in, as long as you are white, you have the upper hand. Thank you.
But if a black person says they hate me because I'm white, that's literally racism. It's literally not. That is an example of prejudice. So when a person of color says something hurtful to a white person based on the color of their skin, I don't like white people because they're the worst. That's prejudice, not racism. Okay, but it's literally all the same thing. No, it's not. Pretend I'm black. You are bird watching in a park and I say, I'm calling the cops. That doesn't even make any sense. Why would you call the cops? Exactly. But it doesn't matter. I'm calling the cops. What are you gonna do? Nothing. Go ahead. I don't care. Exactly. You're not worried. You're figuring, oh, the cops will get here and I'll just tell them I was bird watching. Duh. Okay, so a person of color doesn't have that same luxury. Roles reversed. I was bird watching in a park. You tell me you're gonna call the cops. Now I'm worried that the cops are gonna show up and shoot me without even asking questions. You have institutional power on your side to oppress me, a black person.
White people downplay racism because they can only understand it from the concept or the perspective of reverse racism. And because it's so entirely frivolous, they think that racism itself is entirely frivolous. Hey, don't wear braids, white people. They think that that is reverse racism. And so in their minds, they think that our experience of racism is as frivolous as that. They take being told not to wear braids as an affront to their humanity because they're comparing that to racism, like the real racism that we face. But even within their indignance, editing joy here, it's indignation. I don't know why I said indignance. It's not a real word. Of like, how dare you tell me not to wear braids? They still find it so frivolous. So in their minds, they're like, oh, so this is the racism you're only talking about? It's not that bad. But they'll still fight for their right to wear the braids because they think that that is fighting for their humanity. The whole time we're telling them not to wear braids because their hair will fall out. And they don't understand that the systems that govern how we move and how we decorate ourselves and our bodies are institutional. It's not just people on the internet saying, hey, black people, straight hair is better. It's entire institutions punishing you for not wearing your hair straight. Institutions that affect your livelihood, your mobility within society. Whether or not you're deemed a threat by this country's security apparatus that also has the power to shoot you on sight. We're truly living in different realities.
There's this weird ass black kid. I only said that because he called me an annoying ass white.
You know what? I knew I did good mentioning white entitlement in the last video that I stitched of you because I just seen this video and your most recent, and it's just evident that you have a white male savior complex. So let's go ahead and deconstruct. Something that a lot of white people don't understand, and because they don't understand it, it thus makes them entitled, is that y'all cannot make the same race jokes that other people of color make about y'all that y'all do to us. Wanna know why? Because of history. It's that simple. Y'all have a historic rap sheet of saying and doing things to people of color because of our race. So now in today's times, when we are saying things about y'all's race, it's not hypocritical. It's not, oh, well, y'all can do it, but we can't. No, it's quite literally the repercussions of history that still affects us to this day. With all that being said, nobody has an issue that you referred to a black kid as a black kid. What we have an issue with is that you used him being black as an insult. Duh. When you say weird ass black kid, that black then has a negative connotation to it. Thus, you're making it seem like him being black is a negative thing. That's what makes it racist. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And again, no, it's not hypocritical, and no, it's not racist if a black person uses white in a negative connotation, because again, we quite literally have a negative historical past and present with y'all and how y'all use y'all privilege, entitlement, and power to this day.
So let's revisit the conversation on reverse racism, because some of you don't get it. Succinctly, reverse racism doesn't exist. You can't be racist to white people. That being said, white people can experience racial prejudice, which is discrimination based on the colour of your skin. Somewhere down the line, the words prejudice and bigotry became muddled up with the word racism, when actually they're not synonyms for the term. Racism is a lot deeper than that. It doesn't just exist on an interpersonal level and shouldn't be mistaken with the occasional mistreatment of white people compared to the institutionalized oppression of people of color. If a white person experiences racial prejudice, that will impact them on a personal level, which, by the way, is never okay. However, it doesn't have the authority to interfere with their economic, social, or political privilege. But the same cannot be said the other way around. Some of you might be thinking this is so trivial, however the distinction is very important. You can't equate the mistreatment by those at the bottom of the hierarchy with the oppression that comes from those at the top. It ignores privilege.
No, you can't be racist to white people. Reverse racism isn't real because it ignores the power and privilege dynamic between the groups involved, which in this case are white people and people of color. The term assumes that racism occurs on an even playing field for everyone, which it blatantly does not. This is also why affirmative action programs exist, to make sure that non-white people are given equal consideration and opportunities for things like school, employment, and scholarships. These programs, in turn, reveal the realities of white privilege. And just to make it clear, in no way, shape, or form am I saying that POC can't be racist. What I'm saying is that anyone can experience racial prejudice and discrimination. However, not everyone can experience racism because the term in itself not only refers to prejudice, but also the socialized power structures that exist. And historically, at least in the West, it's white people who have held that power thanks to centuries of Eurocentric beliefs and systems, which have continued to privilege and center whiteness today. Therefore, you can be racially prejudiced towards white people. But
is reverse racism a thing? The term reverse racism is itself a nod to white supremacy because there's an assumption built into it that white people can instantaneously reverse engineer the marginalization and oppression experienced by black people for centuries to create a false sense of victimhood. It represents the effort by non-marginalized groups to temporarily co-opt that oppression to describe the ill feelings that they experience when a black person speaks about race in a way that makes them uncomfortable. Racism is one of two things. Either a person believes in the inherent superiority of their race over yours, or the system is rigged to prop up their race over yours to maintain a particular social order. So if one or both of these factors do not exist, you are in fact not experiencing racism, reverse or otherwise. Now, a black person can carry biases against you because of negative experiences that they've had with someone of your race, or because of their experiences with systemic racism or misconceptions that they might have about you personally due to ignorance, but that's not racism. Bias can exist with regard to anything. Racism is much more deeply ingrained and is always rooted in historic oppression.
Can you be racist against white people? Let's talk about it. This has been talked about many times before, and if you're really interested, I do suggest doing some further research, but because this was commented in my video, I think I'll address it. Racism is often misperceived as something that's like of the individual, like an individual preference or an individual state or someone's individual beliefs about a certain race. But race isn't just about the individual. It denotes a larger racialized system that's maintained by violence. So although a singular person, like an individual, a human, can have a racial prejudice against white people, there's no such thing as racism against white people. Because although one person, like one individual, me or you, could have a racial prejudice against white people, there's no such thing as a systemic, society-level prejudice against white people. And there's no racialized violence committed against white people at a systemic level either. So saying something like white people can't dance or white people can't cook, although those are maybe racially biased comments, those aren't racist comments because there's no systemic racism against white people in this country or really any country for people who are racialized as white. In conclusion, someone who is racialized as white cannot experience racism. A good way to think about this is racism is the existence of racial bias and power. So in the case of white people, although someone can have a racial bias against white people, that person will not have power over white people, and therefore they cannot be racist against white people. That doesn't mean that when you make fun of white people, it doesn't hurt their feelings, I guess.
If you ever thought that arguments for reverse racism were ridiculous, there are 4 major Supreme Court cases right now that are all about whether or not it's real. And because of who's on the court, it's not looking good. The first case is called Merrill v. Milligan. In this case, Alabama's Republican-led legislature was accused of drawing congressional maps that took away voting power from black communities. The maps violated the Voting Rights Act because there was only 1 congressional district in the state where black voters were majority represented when there should have been at least 2 based on their population size. But the state of Alabama argues for a different interpretation of the Voting Rights Act that would prohibit them from redrawing the maps because they said that redrawing the maps in a way that gives proper representation would actually be discrimination in favor of black people. The next 2 cases are called Students for Fair Admission vs. Harvard and Students for Fair Admission vs. UNC. These cases argue that affirmative action unfairly benefits black, Latino, and Native American students through the use of race-conscious admissions in top universities. In response, they want to take away affirmative action even though all of these groups are severely underrepresented in higher education, and this would only make a bad situation worse. And last but not least, we have Holland vs. Brackeen. This case is about the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was created in 1978 to ensure that the Native American child's extended family and other qualified members of the tribe have an opportunity to care for a child whose parents are not able to raise them. But now it's being argued that this law discriminates against white parents looking to adopt a Native American child because it puts them last in line to be considered. Conservatives tie these cases together by saying there's racial discrimination against white people in all of them. As I mentioned in my last video, the key tactic they use in these cases is co-opting and twisting civil rights protections made for black and indigenous people in response to white supremacy by saying that these protections are racist in and of themselves.
Well, in today's episode, I've made a compilation of videos of various individuals commenting about reverse racism. As we all know, racism is one of the most delicate and disturbing issues in the USA, especially from the black American community, that is due to the dark slave history past that is still lingering among the black community in the United States. And with this, there have been an uprise of various terms to try and justify the evil act that was carried out to the black individuals, that is for generation to generation. And this act include racism, systemic racism, discrimination, prejudice, among other inhumane activities that were committed by the white individuals in the United States. And in today's episode, as you've seen, this description of reverse racism, as this has also been a notion that has been pushed that also the white Americans are experiencing racism just as compared to the black individuals. However, this myth has been declassified as the real definition of reverse racism. It has come out to be a certain situation that doesn't exist, as racism comes from a position whereby one group of individuals in the society who have dominance over another group for a certain period of time, let's say a long period of time, to a point that they have created systems that work for them, and therefore tend to look down upon individuals who don't have these same privileges that the group which created this inequality and discrimination has. So in this case, it basically means that white people are immune to racism, as whatever acts will be committed to them that they purposefully view as being racist, it literally has no impact on them. However, we've seen white individuals coming out to claim that they've also experienced racism, and that is through actions and policies from the government, like the affirmative action, the day policies when it comes to employment, and the constant derogatory terms that they usually received from individuals of other races, that is including the black community in the United States. However, all these reasons don't add up to mean that reverse racism is actually taking place, as the impact of these actions only affects them in minor ways compared to the disadvantaged communities. Therefore, this literally means that reverse racism is non-existent. Well, this is all that I have to say in this video. And if you have any comment, kindly don't forget to share with me in the comment section. And thank you once again for watching this episode. See you in the next one.